need that in the directions too, because that's still not obvious to me. Why would they hide it? Okay. Please stand by. We'll be starting shortly. Okay. Hello, everyone. Let's see if I can get myself set up here. I am streaming to you from my daughter's guest bedroom. So I decided to shelter in place in Tampa with my daughter. So I'm balancing, I've got my laptop on a box, so I don't have any of the normal things. But we're here together. So let me start by sharing with all of you who have joined why I'm actually doing these AMA Ask Me Anything sessions. I've been really fortunate through my career in that I've been able to achieve what I set out to achieve, both professionally as well as personally. And I've learned a lot along the way. And I wanted to have a vehicle for being able to share a lot of what I've learned with others so that they can benefit from it and also have the opportunity to achieve what they're aspiring to achieve. So I do these AMA sessions as well as I write a blog, which you can find on ShellyeArchambeau.com. I have a book coming out in October. So I'm trying a number of ways of actually sharing my learnings at scale. So let's start. Fortunately, a number of people have sent in some questions in advance. So my plan is I will start with the questions that I have. And if you have questions that come to mind, please just put them in the chat box and I will address those as they come through. Now, the topics that I typically address in AMAs range from career items to entrepreneurial items. So this particular one was focused on business. That doesn't mean I won't answer career ones. I absolutely will. It just means I'll start with those questions first. But honestly, anything that you're interested in learning, feel free to ask. All right, let me silence the phone. Okay, so let's get started. Now, it was interesting, but not surprising, that many of the questions that I received had to do with this time of crisis. So let me just start by answering the broadest question I received, which is, what's your overall advice to small companies as they battle through COVID-19? Well, my main advice is don't freeze. And what I mean by that is people react to different situations in different ways. Some by frankly panicking and just being reactive, others by freezing and kind of shutting down, and some actually adapt and try to uncover new opportunities. So the number one advice is don't freeze. It's kind of like the military. If a mortar shell is incoming, it doesn't matter what direction you run in, but you run. Do not freeze. You have to be agile in times of crisis. And this is absolutely one of those times. So, just a couple things first, and then we'll dig into the questions of detail. One, conserve capital. Hey, and by the way, this is true for small businesses, large businesses, and it's true for us as individuals as well, because we just don't know what's coming. So you want the ability to have dollars and funds when you need them. So right now, conserve capital so that you have the opportunity to fight, right, coming forward in the future. Second is be transparent with the people that know your business almost as well as you do. So those could be employees, it could be advisors, it could be investors, but share the challenges and the struggles because honestly, the best ideas will come from people who know your business the best. So give them a chance to help in contributing by actually sharing what's happening, what's going on, what are the issues. The other benefit you get from doing that, especially as it relates to employees, is they feel part of where they're going versus feeling that something is happening to them and like more of a victim. Hold on a minute. I have allergies right now. Okay. Um, let's see. The other thing that I would add, just in general, before we go to detail, is be open. Be open to change. And that's what being adaptable and being agile is all about. Because you may find that what you need to do to survive is different from what you thought or different from what you planned to do. And that's okay because it's all about surviving so that you can thrive in the future. All right, so let's go to the first detailed question. And I apologize. Okay, and no, it's not COVID-19, it is just spring allergies. Um, if a company fails to generate revenue due to the crisis, how can one still retain its employees? Well, honestly, there is no magic. So if a company's revenues literally go to zero, they're not going to be able to retain employees over time. If they came into the crisis with a strong balance sheet, then they can try to assist employees, help with at least benefits continuation, maybe just reduced hours, etc. But ultimately, they're going to have to figure out how to generate some revenue so that they can indeed have cash to be able to employ employees. And this is where it's important to pivot and be agile. Because one of the things that I'm seeing is companies are actually trying to be creative. And I'll give you some examples. Whether it is, pardon me, gyms who are completely shut down, now trying to offer online classes and training, or it's companies that are pivoting to actually get into the delivery business, right, which is required, or it's restaurants that turn from being a restaurant and just doing takeout to actually being a commissary or a store to sell wine and high-end food products. I've seen that. Hairdressers, right, are out there and they're providing their hair products for pickup and packaged and then offering virtual trainings on how to either color your hair or cut it or whatever it might be. So you have to be flexible and agile to figure out how you can keep revenue coming in during these challenging times. The other opportunity is thinking about charity. I also saw where a tourist store literally started accepting $25 donations to put together packages that would go to needy families that have activities for kids. Because a lot of families are used to their kids being in school and they're not. and they don't necessarily have a lot of options at home to keep those kids active and engaged. And so what that's done is they have some money coming in, the $25 donations, which they turn around and buy products, create packaging, and send it out. That gives the people something to do, and it gives a little bit of revenue. So be creative. Look for problems to solve. Because at the end of the day, businesses are in business to serve customers. And what you want to do is to figure out how can you serve the customers you have and or others that may be aware of you. So for instance, ask yourself, what do my clients need right now? Forget what I do. What do they actually need? And then is there any way for us as a company to actually meet those needs? And once you figure that out, then can I reallocate my team in some way so that we can actually create a new offering that meets this demand? All of these things are ways to think about your business to help drive that concept of being agile, pivoting, doing something temporary so that you can indeed live right for another day. All right, let's go to the next question. Um, do you have, it says, when everything is virtually managed, how important is it for managers to trust employees? Hmm. Well, I would tell you it's very important for managers to trust employees because it's not just now, but it's in the future. For when you survive, how you treat employees today will affect how they feel about you, about the company, all of it. But many times when I hear the word trust employees, especially when it comes to a virtual context, which we're obviously in, it ties to people not feeling that folks are actually working or working very hard. And so employees feel very, very micromanaged at times. Right now, the best way to instill trust in your employees is not checking in with them every day. What are you doing? What are you doing? But it's just to do what, frankly, good management should be doing anyway, which is you set objectives with timeframes and due dates. And as long as people are getting the work done with quality in the time frame expected, then it doesn't matter, frankly, when they get it done because everybody's extremely stressed right now. Most people, in addition to just the stress of being under COVID, being sheltering in place, et cetera, but they have other people at home. They have services that they're used to having that they don't have, whether it's childcare or help in the household, whatever it might be. So the juggling is heavy. But most people are very resilient and folks want to do a good job. So give them the benefit of the doubt. Set objectives, set timeframes, manage to those, but try not to micromanage. Because research shows that if you can build trust, especially in times of challenge, then ultimately people tend to be more productive and also tend to perform better. So start building that now. And by the way, that same skill will help you later on in good times as well, because it's really just good management. All right, next question. Um, while some of us are trying to extend beyond the normal working hours and working extra hard as we work from home, sometimes it feels that the work we're doing is not valued or appreciated. What should employee do in this case? Believe it or not, management's feeling the same strain. You know, we're all people at the end of the day. So try to give them benefit of the doubt by telling them what you need. And that don't mean you call them up and say, listen, I need some good feedback. But let me give you an example. You could call up and say, Rochelle, with all the isolation and the sheltering in place and all the other things that I'm dealing with, right now in particular, I really need feedback. So if you could just tell me what I'm doing well, what I'm not, what I should work on, etc. But it would make a big difference to me because I'm feeling pretty isolated. All right. So that's a fair request. And you shared it in a very professional way that explained to the manager why you wanted it. So give them the benefit of the doubt and just ask them for it and let them know you need it regularly. Now, unfortunately, not all managers are good managers. So just because you ask for it doesn't mean you're going to get it. If you don't get it, here's where you leverage what I like to refer to as cheerleaders. So what's a cheerleader? And no, I'm not talking about the pom poms. Cheerleaders are people who you frankly designate that will remind you about your capabilities, your strengths, what you're good at, etc. And that can just give you feedback. And by the way, coworkers can make great cheerleaders because you can do it for each other. Um, so that's my advice. All right, a couple questions coming in on chat. So let me just check over here first before I go to the next one. One of the challenges in dealing with employees, is mental health. How can we help keep morale up? So, with regards to morale, this is about communication. I tell you, a lot of times managers and leaders don't realize just how much communication employees really need. But when you're going through a time of crisis and a time when there's so much uncertainty, frankly, the once a month employee communication doesn't cut it. It needs to be regular. There should be group communications at least weekly. And oh, by the way, as managers, you should be talking on the phone, not just an email, not just a text, but on the phone. And that can be visual and or just on the phone, but a couple times a week to your employees. Does that take time? Absolutely. But they need to feel connected. And you need to find out how they're doing. It's real simple too. We're all people. Ask people on a scale of 1 to 5. How are you feeling today? Not in general, just today. And each time you talk to them, ask them. So if they're going up or they're going down, then you can start to ask why. What can I do to make this better? All right. Next question. Many exec roles now start with consulting for a retainer as a trial, sometimes even a detailed go to market plan to enter a new market. How much is too much to give away before a final offer? So here's an opportunity. Here's one that's not so related to business, but talking professional, which is fine. I will tell you, you need to know what your value is. So, is it fair for companies to ask you to demonstrate or to show your capabilities? It absolutely is. But is it fair for them to ask you for a full go to market plan that if they don't hire you, they could just execute without you? No, it's not fair. So, you have to determine, and I can't give you a general answer. What I can tell you is it's fair for them to ask you to demonstrate your capability. A lot of times for engineers, they have to do a programming test by creating some app, et cetera. So those things are fine. But look at how much time and effort you have to put into it and figure out what that means. Now, if they're going to pay you for it, that's a different matter. Then just treat it like a pure consulting job and make sure you're charging market rate. Okay, let's go back to the next question. And please keep the questions coming. I'm monitoring the chat. All right. This phase is challenging not only for businesses, but also for its employees. How can we reassure all the employees of their standing with the company and that we're standing with them during this time and after? Frankly, it's all about how you treat people. You know, it's important to be sensitive, to show empathy. I talked about communicating before. So much of this is communications, but don't make promises that you can't keep. Don't walk around telling everybody, oh, it's all going to be fine. It's not true. Nobody's going to believe that anyway. Things are going to change. Post COVID is going to look like different from pre COVID. Just like after 9/11, right? Our lives after 9/11 changed greatly. We had to go through metal detectors. Many companies made you give them ID that didn't before, right? You can't get in an airplane with water. There's just so many things that changed. The same is going to be true for COVID. I don't know how or what, but it will be different. So walking around telling everybody that everything's going to be fine is not going to engender trust. Instead, be candid, show your vulnerabilities. It's okay to say, listen, I don't have all the answers. There's a lot of uncertainties, but here's what we're doing about it. Here's how we're thinking about this, right? Share with them as a leader how you're approaching this. And the point that I raised earlier about bringing your employees in and let them help you, it's fine to say, listen, our revenue is taking a big hit. We need to grow our revenue to make sure that we can all, right, continue. So I need your ideas. What other ideas do you have for us to create revenue? What other ideas do you have for us to cut costs? Bring them in and make them part of the solution versus feeling that they are just a victim to whatever the whims happen to be. Next question. Finding capital and funding at the moment proves to be more difficult. Any suggestions on how to adapt and do better pitches? Do I need to change my business model to online? All right, so two different questions. As a matter of fact, that's also with regards to fundraising. That's related to another question I got about fundraising. So let me just slide down to what that one was so that I can do two at the same time. Um, here it is. So when you're raising money during times of crisis, net, it's more expensive if you can even get it. And what I mean by more expensive is you typically have to give up much more ownership in your business than you did before. And the reason is there's just more demand, it's supply and demand. And different venture companies want to make sure that the investments they're making are going to be solid. And right now the environment is not solid. So there's higher risk and they're going to make you pay for that higher risk. Now, how you go and do your pitches, yes, I actually do have advice. And the person who sent me that happened to be, it looks like a woman. But there's a YouTube. And by the way, whether you're a female or a minority, and if you're listening, this is helpful advice for both. But there's a YouTube that was done by Dana Kanze, Kanze, called The Real Reason Female Founders Get Less Funding. But I'll tell you, in this as female, you can replace female with minority. She's done a bunch of research and she shares how, not the presentation itself, because presentations tend to be the same. It's more about how you get asked questions and how they're answered that really make the difference. So listen to that. It will absolutely help you. Second, if you can figure out how to survive without money right now, my biggest advice is don't raise it right now. As I said, it's going to be super expensive. It's going to be super hard. It's going to take a whole lot of time and energy that you could be using to try to pivot, adapt, and or just work to survive and managing cash through this period. Now, online, offline, you have to assume that in the post-COVID world, there is going to be more online business than there is now. One of the things that's true during crises is whatever trends were currently underway, they tend to get accelerated. So we already had the trend of e-commerce and e-commerce growing. But honestly, that is going to expand even farther. We already had the trend of people beginning to do more virtual events. That is going to expand much faster. So no reason to invest in a model that's not a growing model. So do you need to move your business online? My view is yes. Now, I don't know exactly what your business is. So if it's not conducive to online, then there's a different answer. But I would tell you, go with the trend. It's easier to grow when you're moving with the current of growth than it is when you're moving against it. Okay. Um, let me just add a little bit to that. I talked earlier about pivoting and the need to pivot. Uh, One of the things that you can do is, as I mentioned up in the beginning of this, is figure out how you can actually meet a need that's out there. I've heard of companies now that frankly are distributing hand sanitizer. I have one that's actually manufacturing it. They weren't doing that before. I have a company that used to be in, providing equipment, technology equipment, et cetera, that's now doing PPE distribution. Were they doing that before? No. Was that part of their business model or vision? No. But you know what? It's bringing in much needed cash right now so that their general business will be able to survive going forward. So go back, look at what's needed right now and figure out if you can do that or meet that to actually raise some dollars to help you just keep the business going. It doesn't matter what it happens to be. Next one. You've built many new businesses in your career, internal and external to existing businesses. From a personal leadership point of view, how do you approach successfully building a new business? It all starts with a market need. Many people fall in love with a product and they try to bring a product to market. But what I tell people is you need to fall in love with a segment of the market. Figure out what need is out there and then how you can fulfill that need better than anyone else. Because at the end of the day, businesses become successful because they meet a need that people or other companies have. And oh, by the way, it's a need that is a must need to fix need, not just a nice to have need. Because during times of crisis, and you all know that, the nice to have things we're not doing. We're not going on vacation right now. We're not out at restaurants right now. There are a lot of things we're not doing which were nice to haves, but we're doing all things we need to have. So grocery businesses are rising, right? Because we absolutely have to have food. And then we have to have things to engage us. So things like even gardening is growing right now. So companies that are doing anything related to getting gardening supplies to people, et cetera, are actually growing. So the key is find a need and then figure out how you can meet that need better than anyone else and use that as the kernel or the base to actually build your business. And then it comes down to surrounding yourself with the right team and putting in place a business model that will work for you, for your customers, and for your vendors. All right, next one. Well, that one I kind of addressed. What would be the best way? So here's someone who's asking how they can help. What would be the best way I can provide my help to women and other minority owned businesses on finding the right investors or VCs? All right, if you have that skill, that background and knowledge, my advice is put yourself out there. Write some articles, do some posts, but basically put yourself out there to say, hey, I can help in this way, and let people know how they can reach you. You can also reach out to associations that focus on these different groups. There's a number of groups that focus on minority entrepreneurs and focus on women, et cetera. So let them know what you have, how you can help, and what's available. Those would be my suggestions there. And the next one is, let's see. Hmm. A lot of multinational corporations are cutting down on the workforce during this crisis. Times suggest employment won't be the same anytime soon. What are your views? Well, unfortunately, you're right. I believe that elevated unemployment is going to continue and persist for a while. Now, if you believe that your job is actually at risk or maybe at risk, then listen to the advice I said right up front. Don't freeze. Don't sit there and just wait for something to happen to you. Instead, start mitigating your risks. I don't mean just quit your job, but do the work to figure out what can I do? Where are the growing industries and or companies? Because even in times of crisis, there are companies that are countercyclical. As I said, right now, if you're in the business of online gaming, you're probably growing. If you're in the business of food delivery, you're probably growing. If you're in the business of, I mentioned gardening or helping other companies get online, helping other companies build websites. A lot of companies are found flat-footed and they're trying to figure out how they become virtual and offer their services. And so they're looking for help and resources to actually do that. So start looking to see where is their growth, what might fit your skills, do the work, and have yourself ready so that you can indeed find something different to do and other ways of adding value. All right, next question. How do you build resiliency both for the company and for ourselves as leaders? Hmm. Well, let me actually make that personal. How do I keep my resiliency? Because I've been through now several crises and I've had different roles in those crises. And what I will tell you is always keep in mind that we'll get through this. We'll get through this. Right now, it may not feel like it, but we will. And then keep your eye on what it is that you're trying to achieve. For instance, I just did a call this morning with one of the companies that I'm engaged with. And I basically said, listen, and they're going through a really tough time. And I said, listen, I know our numbers aren't going to be good, but I believe in the strategy. I believe in the people. I believe that what we are doing and what we are delivering and providing to customers is all right. So, yes, times are tough right now and we're having to make really hard decisions. But at the end of the day, they will allow us to emerge stronger. Making making tough decisions, going through pain is totally uncomfortable. But the analogy that I will use is it's like an athlete. Very few athletes, and in fact, I don't think any, get to the top of their field without experiencing pain. And most of that pain is from muscles. It's from muscles that are being stretched, muscles that are being worked. And as a result, those muscles get stronger, they get more flexible. And that's true for businesses as well. You go through pain, you go through hard times, but it does make you stronger and it does make you more flexible and it does make you more adaptable. And therefore, you can handle more things that go or come in your way in the future. But the same is true for people because we're all athletes in our own way. And when we go through tough times, we are stretching ourselves and we are enduring hard things. But you know what? As long as you're learning from them, and as long as you're figuring out how not to let it define you, then you'll come out more resilient. So just keep in mind, this is a period. We're going to get through this period. I'm sure we're all ages on this call. And if you happen to be in your 20s and 30s, you're going to be around for another 50 years. So you'll get through this and have plenty of opportunities for experience. If you're closer to my age and you're only looking at maybe 20 years ahead of yourself or so, you still have 20 some odd years. So don't let this virus, this crisis, what you're dealing with define who you are. One of the things I like to say is we can't control what happens to us or what people do to us, but we can control how we respond. And the key is to respond consistent with your values, with your beliefs, and with how you want to be perceived as you go forward. Okay. Well, everyone, I think that wraps up all the questions I have received. Thank you so much for joining my Ask Me Anything session. I do these once a month. Just follow me on LinkedIn or Instagram or Twitter, whatever. They always get announced. And I hope that you found some value in today's session. And I appreciate the time that you've taken. But look for me. I have handles on Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Shellye Archambeau on Instagram as well as Twitter, and Shellye Archambeau. Good news is my name is spelled very unusually, so you can find me easily on LinkedIn. Have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.